Recording. Thank you and welcome to the 4 Aims of Life according to the Vedas with Brent BecVar. We're so happy to have him here as the faculty for the Feast for the Soul. And Brent, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, thank you. Grateful to be here and welcome to everyone. And thank you for attending this talk. It's a subject I really, really love. And it's this particular subject of the 4 aims of life, referred to in Sanskrit as the purusharthas, is an integral part of the Vedic tradition. And as I mentioned when I introduced the subject earlier, all of the great books of the Veda, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, the Rig Veda, all the great books of the Veda in some way or other address this subject of the purusharthas, and because it's that fundamental to our lives, to our lives as human beings. And I'm excited to share about this with you all, because it's the kind of subject that we can really observe in ourselves. We can use it as a kind of a template for observing ourselves in any moment. And I'll explain what I mean as we go along. But as is customary in the Vedic tradition, when we approach a sacred subject like this, we want to introduce this topic with a mantra. So let's just close our eyes and bring our attention inside for a moment. Om Ekadantaya Vidmahe Vakratundaya Dhimahi Tanodanti Prachodayat. Om Ganganapataye Namaha Vagdevyaya Cha Vidmahe Kamapradaya Dhimahi Tanodevi Prachodayat. Om Aim Shrim Hrim Saraswati Devye Namaha Prabhakaraya Vidmahe Divakaraya Dhimahi Tana Surya Prachodayat. Om Sum Suryaya Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Let's begin to open our eyes. Just briefly, that mantra is an invocation of Ganesh. Ganesh is the elephant-headed boy that is symbolizes certain archetypal themes in the Vedic tradition, often referred to as the remover of obstacles. But Ganesh, another name for Ganesh, is Ganapati. Ganapati, often translated as the Lord of categories. And so Ganesh, we propitiate Ganesh at the beginning of a subject like this to help us to put everything in its proper order of reality, because there are a lot of concepts that we'll explore. So we wanted to sort of be coherent. By the way, Ganesh is the Ishta Devata, or the deity for Vedic astrologers, for the same reason, so that we can put everything in its proper order of reality when we're exploring a particular chart. We also invoked Saraswati, the deity much associated with learning, with music, with speech. And we propitiated the sun, Surya, to illumine our understanding and our inquiry here today. So the subject of the purusharthas, I want to just begin with a brief inquiry for all of us here today, just to sort of bring us into this subject. I'd like each of you to consider for a moment, maybe you can even write this down on a piece of paper, this simple inquiry. And it's not it's not a casual inquiry, but it might seem so. I want to ask you, why do you get out of bed every day? Why do you get out of bed every day? Take a moment and just reflect on this subject of why do I get out of bed every day? And see if you can make a couple of notes about your response to that inquiry. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of responses or a lot of potential responses to this inquiry. Why do I get out of bed every day? And just kind of put that aside for the moment. If you've written something down, maybe we'll reflect on it in a minute. But I think if we consider why do we get out of bed every day, obviously there's going to be some kind of desire that will motivate us. And at this point, I'm going to share my screen with you all, if I can do this gracefully and see if I can. If we didn't have a particular desire to get out of bed every day, we might look a little bit like this fellow. And as I often say, with all respect to the slug kingdom, even a slug has some desire. Even if you've ever watched a slug going along very slowly, they're moving towards something. There's some desire that's motivating them to move, even though to us, it may look like they're just standing still. But obviously, everyone is motivated by some desire each morning when we get out of bed. Here's a quote from the Brihat Upanishad. It says, "You are what your deep driving desire is. As is your desire, so is your will. As is your will, so is your deed. And as is your deed, so is your destiny." Brihat Upanishad. So desire is really at the basis of everything. Desire brought us, you might say, into being from the spark between the sperm and the ovum. Desire has motivated us ever since, from beginning to crawl, to walk, to run, to speak, to write, all in pursuit of our desires. Desire is the seed of every thought we think, every breath, and every step we take. Desire, in fact, underlines everything in existence. All creation is the fruit of desire. All doing results from wanting. So in the Vedic tradition, there are many tools and techniques that have come down to us, and certainly the science of yoga, which is the science of transformation, offers a great wealth of these tools and techniques to us. But the subject today has to do with 4 particular aims of life that will motivate us in any moment of our lives. The first is the desire to live, to survive, to thrive, to be healthy, and to have a purpose, some sense of purpose. I am here for a reason, and I have a reason to be. The second has to do with the acquisition of resources, mainly material things. And we're going to talk in more detail about this, but essentially acquisition of the means by which we can live and ultimately fulfill our purpose in life. So acquisition of means. The third, once we have our basic resources in place, our basic fundamental survival needs, we seek to expand our enjoyment in life. And in so doing, we seek meaningful relationships with significant others. So enjoyment, but also, more specifically related to our relationships. And finally, freedom. Freedom from the limitations of the body, freedom from emotional constraints, freedom from the limitations of our own minds, and ultimately spiritual freedom. And we're going to discuss each of these, but these are essentially the four aims of life that are referred to in Sanskrit as the purusharthas. The purusharthas, the word purushartha, the word purusha means essentially pure consciousness in Sanskrit, which we all experience through our individual soul or atman. Artha means the ability or for the purpose of. So purushartha, the purusharthas mean for the purpose of the soul. Important to kind of keep that in mind as we explore the subject today. So what are the four purusharthas? Well, I gave a kind of a brief introduction to the essential four aims, but the first in Sanskrit is dharma. I'm sure all of you have heard this term at some point, dharma. Dharma can be translated as our moral values, not in a fundamentalist sense, but the way we seek to align with natural law. So dharma is everywhere in creation. Dharma is sort of the law which seeks to sustain everything in some kind of universal order. And each of us, to the extent that we align with our own nature, we align with, in a harmonious way, with natural law. And one of the principal inquiries that we have, and we're going to explore some inquiries as we go through these four aims today. The principal inquiry around dharma is how can we best align with our own nature and with natural law? And how do I fit into this great grand play that we're all in? And how can I best contribute with whatever talents, gifts, and abilities I have? The second of the purusharthas is referred to as artha, A-R-T-H-A. And artha is the means. It has to do with our economic values. And essentially with prosperity and maintenance. Often, the first thing we think about when we talk about artha is money as a symbol for acquisition of the means, of other means, acquisition of other material things. But artha can also refer to our clothes, our homes, our computers, and basic material values that we seek in order to live our purpose. So resources in general. And one of the principal inquiries around artha is, what are the means I need to support my life and support my purpose, living my purpose? The third of the purusharthas is kama, K-A-M-A, as in Kama Sutra. Kama essentially means enjoyment. It has more to do with our psychological values. And ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, when we have our survival needs basically in place, we look for other people with whom to share pleasure, to share enjoyment. So our relationships. And the principal inquiry around kama is, what gives me pleasure and what gives pleasure to others? And the fourth of the purusharthas is referred to as moksha. Many of you have heard this term, moksha, often translated as self-realization or spiritual liberation. And it refers to our spiritual values. Moksha, you might say, is the already always so. It's not something that we're seeking to achieve, really, even though you hear people say that. Moksha is already who we are in our essential nature. And to the extent that we honor that consciousness or spirit, whatever we want to call it, that's something bigger that I referred to earlier in our meditation, to the extent that we allow that in our lives, it can inform our choices and help us to make more evolutionary decisions. So the principal inquiry around moksha is, who or what am I really? So we're going to explore all of these four aims of life in a little more detail here. But what I want to say is that in any moment of our lives, even right now, all of these four aims of life are operating to a greater or lesser degree. And so as we go along and explore these four aims of life, we're going to see how we may shift from one or another of these. But at the same time, we want to always consider that finding a balanced relationship among all four of these make for a conscious life. Dharma and moksha, we say, are the spiritual desires, and artha and kama are the material desires. So as I started to say, finding the balance among these four and reconciling them together is our life quest, whether we know it or not. Of course, it's better to know it, and that's why we're even talking about it. So first subject of dharma. There's a quote from Deepak here. He says, everyone has a purpose in life, a unique gift or special talent to give others. And when we blend this unique talent with service to others, we experience the ecstasy and exaltation of our own spirit, the ultimate goal. Dharma, the word, comes from the Sanskrit or dri, which is translated to make firm or to establish or to support or uphold that which sustains. There is, first of all, a kind of universal dharma. Everything has dharma in the universe. Everything has a purpose, has a function in relation to the whole. And ultimately, universal dharma does give order to all of existence based on certain universal laws. And everything in some way contributes to the welfare of the whole when it is in alignment with its particular dharma, its particular purpose. We could see this in the seed. The seed has an essential dharma. When a seed is planted in a particular environment, when it has the artha, the resources, the seed will mature and grow and manifest and fulfill its purpose and ultimately give its fruit or give its seed. The sun has its dharma. The dharma of the sun is to shine on everything and everyone and to animate and illumine and energize everything that it reaches. And in our solar system, the sun also, in some way, supports the dharma of all the planets, which move in their particular, unique, individual orbits according to certain laws. And of course, this is the study of astronomy and astrology, which was among the first sciences. Ultimately, it was the study of time. So the dharma of the sun is to hold the planets in their orbits, and the dharma of each planet, you might say, is to fulfill a particular purpose in relation to the other planets and into the whole of the solar system. And of course, there are many such solar systems throughout the galaxy. Each is being held in a particular held by particular universal laws, all fulfilling an essential dharma in relation to the whole. So here we want to talk a little bit about individual dharma, or swadharma, as it's pronounced in Sanskrit, which means individual or personal dharma. So each of us, when we are aligning with our particular nature, as I said earlier, in a harmonious way, we also align with natural law. And when we align with natural law, we feel supported by natural law. Individual dharma, you might say, is set in motion by our birth circumstances. We're each born into a particular environment. from the moment of birth, the moment that we leave the body of the mother, we are influenced by particular qualities of the environment. We begin to experience the environment through the five senses. And we also, as we see in Vedic astrology, we're imprinted by the greater environment, which sets in motion our particular life circumstances. We're also born to a particular parent and in a particular family, particular culture, and other things that begin to, in some way, condition us as we move into our lives. And of course, this is a reflection of certain karmas too, and that's another whole subject when we talk about karma, because there are many different types of karma. But according to the Vedic tradition, we come into life with a particular set of karmas to address in this lifetime. And this is called prarabdha karma. And karma is also the subject of a Vedic astrology chart, because in the chart you can see certain positive talents, gifts, and abilities that every child is born with. Everybody's different in that regard. And also other potential challenges that we look to overcome and address in our life. So certain talents, gifts, and abilities are indicated from the birth circumstances. We all have them. And our swadharma, our purpose, a sense of purpose, is also influenced by the choices that we make. This is a different kind of karma, where the more consciously we make choices, the more likely we are to have a positive result from those choices. Different actions are required at different times as our dharma changes. The dharma of a child, for example, is very different from the dharma of an elder. The dharma of a child is first and foremost to get to know this body, to find out what is this? What is this environment that I'm in? And who are these other beings around me? So, the dharma of a child is to really begin to relate to the environment in which it finds itself. The dharma of a householder or a parent is more to contribute to the community in some meaningful way through some kind of work, and also to raise children, perhaps if the children are part of the karma, and to support the children in rising in their lives and developing their talents, gifts, and abilities, and feeling safe and well-adjusted and so on. And the dharma of an elder, once the children are grown and we're withdrawing somewhat from career, the dharma of an elder is more to be sort of knowledge holders for the younger ones, to hold space, you might say, and hold the knowledge of their life experience to benefit the younger ones. So different dharma at different times in the life. And a big part of swadharma, of personal dharma, is accepting who we are and letting go of resistance. Not attempting to be someone that we're not, and really honoring our natural talents, gifts, and abilities. You might say, learning to act according to our own wiring. Very important that we honor our own nature. And honoring our own nature will authenticate our actions and our choices going forward. Ultimately, alignment with dharma will motivate us to seek authentic connection and union with the whole by playing our unique part in this grand play. So everyone has a dharma, an individual dharma, swadharma. And I think the first step in dharma is to really ask for it with a sincere heart. What am I supposed to do? How can I best contribute? These inquiries are important, and we can make these inquiries inwardly, but we can also make them in the form of a sincere prayer. Show me how to contribute with whatever talents, gifts, and abilities I have. Because when we open ourselves to the universe is, I think, just waiting for us to be willing to play our part. And that's when the clues start to appear and we start to recognize, oh, this is the path for me. You know, the ills of the world arise from being disconnected from a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning. And we can even see this in a very physical sense in terms of cancer cells, which have forgotten their dharma and no longer live in relation to the whole organism. So the illusion of separation takes us out of that relationship to the whole and takes us out of dharma. The word in Sanskrit is adharma, meaning as opposed to dharma. Dharma is preeminent and pre-existing everywhere in nature. It is dharma that inspires us to live as fully as possible. And it is always the first of the purusharthas, because when we align with dharma, everything seems to fall more easily into place with the other three aims of life. So whatever talents, gifts, and abilities we have, this is what we want to align with. We want to accept and honor in ourselves. So the inquiry is, with whatever talents, gifts, and abilities and life experience I have, how can I best contribute to the welfare of the whole? What am I naturally disposed to? What am I naturally passionate about? And most specifically, how can I help? How can I serve? This is very important because when we feel in alignment with our sense of purpose, when we feel in alignment with our natural talents, gifts, and abilities, we just want to give those to others. We just want to share because we feel fulfilled in that, living that sense of purpose that's natural for us. The second of the purusharthas, artha, often refers to wealth, abundance, material prosperity, our resources, our basic material resources. And as I said earlier, it's the means that support or sustain our purpose or our dharma. Some examples of artha are money, as I said, but it can also be things like food and drink, nutrition, that which sustains the body. And the body itself is a form of artha. And so well-being and health, breath, the environment, and how we relate to the environment in terms of our health. Even each part of the body is a form of artha in relation to the whole. But also clothes, shelter, vehicles, computers, tools of the trade, just the practical necessities of life. Even in some respects, our spiritual practices, meditation, prayer, observation of silence can be a form of artha or a means to align with dharma. So skillfully living with what is and appreciating what we have. That's why practicing gratitude, which is probably one of the most important companion practices to our meditation practice that we can spend time with each day, to acknowledging what we already have to be grateful for. Because when we put our attention on what we think we may lack, and we all sometimes do that, we all kind of contract and start thinking about what do I lack, or what might I lack in the future, or what am I afraid of losing? When we put our attention on what we lack, we just create more of a sense of lack. It's that simple law of attraction. What we put our attention on becomes enlivened in our experience. And that's why putting our attention on what we already have right now to be grateful for. And believe me, every one of us, if we take even 5 minutes to start to consider, what do I have in my life right now that I'm grateful for? There's no end to the things that we'll come up with. But the point of the exercise, or the point of this practice every day, is that we start to feel our heart expand. The more we consider what we actually have to be grateful for, we start to feel more and more and more abundant. And that's when we have much more ability to attract more of the same. Again, this law of attraction. So putting our attention on what we have to be grateful for, in some respects, attracts more of the same. Practicing gratitude around particularly our our material resources, the artha factor. Some of the inquiries around artha are, what do I need to play my role? What material things do I actually need in order to live my purpose? Do I have enough? Whoops. Am I afraid of not having more? Am I afraid of having more? Another interesting inquiry. And what does wealth mean for me besides money itself? Because wealth can be abundance in many forms. And in fact, you know, when we start to consider, we live in an abundant universe. We live in a sea of affluence. All we have to do is look at nature, and we see everywhere this abundance and affluence. So the third of the four aims of life is kama. Kama is divine desire created and expressed in the world. And as we often say, desire makes the world go round. Everything is sort of motivated by some kind of desire. And we wouldn't get out of bed, as we said earlier, in the morning without desire. So pleasure, sensuality, desire for intimacy, beauty, love are some examples of kama. And relationships in general, and shared enjoyment, sexuality, and desire for union, which is really at its basis a desire for intimacy. As they say, intimacy is into me you see, meaning we allow somebody to know us as we are without our self-defended personality in the way. We relax our song and dance, which is, I think, a good metaphor for the personality. All the ways that we want to get attention and love, and all the ways that we seek to avoid pain or criticism or negative attention. So intimacy is feeling safe, allowing ourselves to feel safe with the other and holding space so that they can feel safe with us. Kama relates to the pursuit of satisfaction or pleasure, which inspires all of our actions. So as I said, once our survival needs, artha, are in place, we seek a more expanded sphere of enjoyment and look to share those experiences with others. So some of the inquiries around kama are, what brings delight and enjoyment to me and others that I may influence? What pleasures enhance consciousness and which deplete the soul? This is a very important inquiry, because if we don't feel suitably aligned with a sense of purpose and with our own aligning with our own nature, there's an emptiness there, and we often seek to fill up that emptiness through getting more and more and more stuff, more and more and more artha, which never seems to really fill the bill ultimately, and it can lead us to avarice and greed. Or we may seek more and more and more pleasure, which ultimately can lead us away from our life purpose and may even result in addiction. So seeking to fill up our emptiness through more and more pleasure can lead us ultimately away from dharma, or our life purpose. So the fourth aim of life is moksha, as we said. Moksha, you might say, is the pinnacle of the purusharthas. So our spiritual desires, our spiritual values, that which draws us toward that something bigger we spoke about during the meditation, which we can't really define as anything, but that's something bigger, which is consciousness itself, which is in fact the context of all of our experience and of everything in reality. So moksha is really opening ourselves to that. And in doing so, we liberate ourselves from a sense of separateness through the realization of our own nature as that consciousness, as that essential consciousness, which is everywhere and in everything. There's a beautiful quote in the Bhagavad Gita that I'm very fond of, where Krishna says to Arjuna, "Seek that knowledge alone by which all else may be known." And in that, he's saying, seek the knowledge of our own essential nature as consciousness first, because in knowing that, we know the source and essence of everything and everyone, because consciousness is the source and essence of everything and everyone. So seek that knowledge alone by which all else may be known, which gives context to everything in our experience. So moksha is freedom from attachment to suffering. You know, that's very important to acknowledge. A lot of times we hold on to our suffering because it gives us a sense of, I don't know, it gives us a sense of peculiar comfort. But as we begin to surrender that suffering and surrender fear and surrender this illusion of limitation, we begin to experience more and more and more freedom, more and more expansiveness, and less limitation, even as this idea of a me, which is not even real. It's a fiction that we make up, this character. So moksha is the dissolution of delusion and of boundaries. So becoming free of the story of me, free of the burden of the story, and accepting what is without any resistance, which was our approach in the meditation today. Just beginning to accept everything as it is and letting go of all identification with a separate sense of self. This is true moksha. And one of the inquiries around moksha is, what am I doing to free myself from choices that make me unhappy? So not feeling a victim and being willing to surrender our unhappiness. Non-attachment, detaching from this illusion of separate sense of self, or vairagya as it's called in Sanskrit. Om Namah Shivaya, the great prayer of every spiritual tradition. Not my will, but the divine will be done. I surrender to the will of the divine. Or who or what am I really is a prominent inquiry around moksha. So as I mentioned, all four of these aims of life are operational, but depending on our individual karma, and certainly you can see this in a Vedic horoscope, when you look at a Vedic chart, you can see why because each of these four aims of life are reflected in one or another of the 12 houses in the Vedic chart. And I'll give an example. I'll show an example of this in a minute. So just to sort of recap, dharma is a sense of purpose, a sense of alignment with natural law, alignment with our own nature, which is already existent, in alignment with great nature, and recognizing that we are part of nature. And as such, nature will express itself through us as joy. Artha is the means by which we can support ourselves so that we can fulfill our purpose, we can live our purpose. And so artha is always comes second to dharma. So we want to seek the alignment with dharma first, and then we seem to attract the resources appropriate for our purpose when we do. Kama is enjoyment, seeking meaningful relationships with whom to share pleasure. But if we're in alignment with dharma, we tend to seek appropriate relationships that will support us in our dharma, in our purpose, and not detract or pull us away from a sense of purpose. So that's why we always want to align with dharma first. Very, very, very important. And this is emphasized over and over again in the books of the Vedas. Alignment with dharma. And finally, moksha, freedom. And as we live our purpose in life, we more gracefully move toward this direct experience of freedom in life, because we don't create resistance. When we're not in alignment with natural law, we often create a sense of friction, resistance, even illness or adversity in our lives. That's why every spiritual tradition in some way presents precepts or aphorisms, like the 10 commandments or the yamas and the niyamas in the Vedic tradition. And every religion or every spiritual tradition encourages people to align with natural law in some way and not to act against nature, because there are consequences when we act against nature. So alignment with dharma. And again, we can see this in the Vedic chart. Some people are just much more naturally inclined to be aligned with natural law, and some people have to learn some difficult lessons by acting against nature in one form or another. I just want to show you, speaking of the Vedic chart, two examples. These are two different styles of the Vedic astrology horoscope. The one on the left is the South Indian style. The one on the right is the North Indian style. They both give the same information. In the basic constellations, I'm just going to focus on the South Indian style chart for a minute. Each of these boxes represents one of the 12 constellations, always beginning with Aries in the first box, followed by Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and so on. And, based on a person's date, time, and place of birth, we see which of these constellations was appearing on the horizon when they were born. And that sets up the whole relationship of all the planetary bodies, which will also be seen in one or another of these constellations. And that's how we begin to delineate a horoscope. But in the basic chart, whatever the rising constellation is, say, for example, like Sarah, is her rising sign is Taurus. So Taurus then becomes the first house of her chart. And then all the other 11 houses are determined according to the natural order of the zodiac from Taurus in her case. And each one of us has a particular rising sign, which will set up the order of the houses in the chart. But in the natural order of the zodiac, Aries is always the first of the constellations. And Taurus is second, Gemini third, and so on. And so each of these so-called houses has to do with a different area of life in the Vedic chart. But appropriate to our conversation about the purusharthas, the first house, the fifth house, and the ninth houses all have to do with dharma. The fire signs, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, all have to do with dharma. But in accordance with our own horoscope, whatever our first house is, whatever rising sign we have, that becomes the first house of dharma, and then the fifth house from there is also house of dharma, and the ninth house from there is dharma. The second house, the sixth house, and the 10th houses of a chart have to do with artha, resources, things we value. We don't have time to go into great detail about this right now. Just trust me, when we're delineating a chart and we're looking at how are the four aims of life balanced in the life of this individual, we see where certain planets are placed in these different houses, whether it's the dharma houses, the artha houses, 2, 6, and 10. The kama houses are the third house, the 7th house, and the 11th house. And I think you can tell that all these are trinal to one another. So the third house is a house of kama, and then 5 constellations away is the 7th house, house of kama, and then 5 constellations away from that is the 11th house, house of kama, and then 5 houses away from that is Gemini again. And then moksha, the houses of moksha are the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house from the ascendant. So I just wanted to point this out, that these 4 aims of life are that fundamental to life that they are actually reflected in the Vedic chart of any individual. And depending on, what planets, as I said earlier, are placed in certain of these houses, how the planets exist in relation to one another, how they influence one another, and most particularly, how they may influence the rising sign, whatever that may happen to be. In the Vedic chart, we don't think of a person in terms of the sun sign, but rather the rising sign. And the moon is considered very important. The North Indian style chart, by the way, is read a little differently. The South Indian chart is read clockwise, like this. The North Indian chart is read counterclockwise. This is always the first house, this box here, followed by the 2nd house, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and so on. And depending on whatever a person's rising sign. So if we were looking at Sarah's chart and Sarah's Taurus ascendant, Taurus would be here in this box, and the number 2, which is the sign of Taurus. I don't want to give you too much, too many little details here for now. But the main point of this is to point out that in the life of any individual, there is a kind of an order that incorporates these 4 aims of life, these 4 purusharthas. I don't know that we have time to go through each of the houses, and so I'm not going to attempt to do that right now. I think it's probably not appropriate to the to the time we have, because I'd like to maybe have some discussion and maybe have some time for questions. But mainly what I want to leave us with here is that we can begin as a spiritual practice to inquire, and this is very fundamental to understanding the purusharthas, is personal self-reflective inquiry. In any moment, what is motivating me? Here in our Western culture, we're often very motivated by the acquisition of resources, more and more and more stuff. Sadly, even in India, which used to be, I think a lot more spiritual place, I don't know, that it's become much more driven by more stuff. There's no judgment about that. It's just that seems to be what predominates. So we have to always take a step back and inquire, okay, am I so driven by my need for more and more and more stuff that I'm actually forgetting to inquire, what is my real purpose here? And the minute we start to inquire about what our real purpose is, we kind of relax our anxiety about getting more stuff, and we start to really inquire into what are the things I really love to do? What are my talents, gifts, and abilities that I already have? And what would I do if I didn't care about what other people thought, if I didn't care if I made any money? I mean, this is an important inquiry around dharma. What would I care if, what would I do if I didn't do it for the money, but I did it purely for the love of it? Because you want to feel like I'm getting up every day doing something I'm really meant to do, and I'm doing something I really love, and I'm doing it for the love of it. And when we can actually say that about what we're doing in our lives, as I said, the resources seem to come in an appropriate way. Maybe not in a grand way, although some people have the dharma to live a very big experience in life and often attract great resources in order to do that. But it may not be necessary for each of us to live on that kind of scale. And so we want to really consider, what would I do if I could do every day what I most love to do, and what I most love to share with others. And when we do share what we love to do with others, feel that they're appreciating us. They're saying, that's great. This is exactly what you're meant to do. Do more of that, please, more of that. So, when we do that, we seem to attract the relationships that are going to support the continued expression of dharma, of aligning with dharma. And as I said, moksha is a kind of a natural development when we live in alignment with dharma. As they say in one of the great Vedic prayers, when the creeper reaches maturity, the flower, I should say, the seed will naturally fall from the vine, and that's when the liberation comes. We don't make it happen. We actually just relax into it. It's a natural a development, that awakening to source. So, as I said, we want to start to observe in ourselves how we're living in relation to these four aims of life. And certainly our spiritual practice every day is part of our spiritual values. It's part of the moksha piece. It's just taking that little bit of time every day to let go, completely let go, and allow nature to support us, allow consciousness to allow ourselves to be infused with that deeper nature of our own nature as consciousness. So letting go every day supports the moksha piece. So it's a balancing act, always it's a balancing act. But in any moment, we have the ability to stop and inquire, who am I in relation to these four aims of life right now? And see how we're being motivated. And we can always sort of recalibrate with that realization. So I think that's basically what I wanted to say in introducing the subject. And Sarah, maybe we can have some discussion or invite some questions related to these four aims of life.
Absolutely. If you want to unmute yourself or put a question in the chat for Brent, feel free to do that. I just love this conversation. I just love the self-inquiry, and I love the way you explain it. So thank you. Would anyone like to share? You can unmute yourself or go ahead and put something in the chat.
A question
Well, first of all,
about,
does this make sense to you? And you can all respond to this. Did this make sense to you, what I was saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, you can just nod or, yeah, good. Okay, sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say it's a lifetime of study, so I could
It's a
listen to this
lifetime
again and
study.
again.
Yeah, it's not something that you go, oh yeah, I get that, and then go back to being unconscious. This is almost like an initiation for us in presenting this subject, because from this moment on, we have a new kind of tool to understand ourselves, to know ourselves, and to create a more balanced life. Go ahead, Kelly. You started to ask a question.
so for with the 4 aims of life, do we all possess a little bit of everything, or is it possible you could completely lose one of them or more? I'm thinking of.
No, I don't think it's possible we could complete. These are fundamental to our lives as human beings. There is in all of us a desire for a sense of purpose, because when we align with that sense of purpose, and usually the sense of purpose has to do with service in some way, where we're feeling like I want to give my gift. I want to share my gift with others. We feel, as Deepak said in that quote, the exaltation of the spirit. And so there's something in us that is always seeking to express our true purpose. And of course, some people may struggle with artha. Some people may really struggle with a sense of acquisition of means. And so that subject can dominate the attention of certain people, whether they don't have enough or whether they have abundance, but they're still just completely obsessed with more and more and more means. So everybody's different in regard to artha, but everybody has a relationship with artha. And same with kama. We all have relationships. We all seek relationships for one purpose or another. So we have to really inquire, what kind of people am I attracting in my life, and for what purpose am I attracting them, and are they supporting my evolution and my dharma? And then finally, do we have a sense of a spiritual life? You might say, well, some people seem completely oblivious to spiritual life, but just the very fact that they're conscious of anything points to the fact that they do have this connection, but potential connection with moksha. So to answer your question briefly, everyone has a connection with these 4 purusharthas, but the idea here is that we want to become more and more conscious of our relationship with these 4 principles so that we can live a more balanced and fulfilled life.
You can't see me because I don't have a camera. My name's Stephanie, but my nickname is Spider. I'm a minister and I'm agnostic. Some people have a big problem with that because they do not understand the difference between agnostic and atheist or what have you. I just believe in the divine. But from my birth, I always sought death due to circumstances in my life. Now, a little over a decade ago, I had a car accident and was in a coma for 3 days. And it's taken some time for me to come out of it. But now that my personality is back and the things that I know are me, this has been part of me since I was a child. I had such a different way of being and thinking, really didn't care about I don't need gratification from anyone else. As long as I'm happy within, I love to be in service of others, whether it's cooking a meal, giving someone a ride to the grocery store. And these things are just so beautiful coming back to life. And honestly, at 56 years young, I never thought I would like a computer so much in my life. And with all this COVID, to Zoom and have all these beautiful people from all around the world seeking the same. You were all fantastic. And I so feel just such a beautiful energy just being here. And I want to say that I appreciate you all.
Thank you for sharing your a little bit about yourself, Spider. And I hope that that this conversation that we had today may give you something to reflect about in your own life, and as I hope, wish, and pray that it will for all of us. And but give it a little bit of time. These are maybe some different kinds of concepts. I like what you said about coming out of a coma. Your personality is coming back. I think that's something to observe in each of us, because we're not really the personality. The personality is just a sort of a collection of our history and of our memories and beliefs. But as we pursue, not pursue, but as we inquire into our deeper nature, we begin to see that we are truly not the personality. We're not the history. We're not the story. We all have stories, but who we really are is the consciousness in which all the stories take place. I'm glad you came out of the coma, and I'm glad that you came to a convocation like this. I think this is significant of your karma, that you're seeking the association of these kinds of people. So
And
welcome.
when I say my personality, what I mean is not gossiping, trying to help people, not feeding into drama. I am a loving, caring individual who shines. Even on days if I have tears in my eyes, a kind word never hurt anyone. And I make a point, if I see you in your man, woman, or child, and there's something that attracts my eye, I give that compliment.
Well,
And
see that, I think of that as being more in alignment with dharma, what you just shared. It's not so, yeah, I mean, well, we don't need to get into a discussion of semantics here, but personality is sort of a pattern of habits. But when we kind of move out of personality and start to act from dharma, that's when we come from that place of generosity that you're speaking about. So I just want you to kind of reflect on that a little bit. Who am I really? That one question is a very important inquiry. Who am I really? So let's open it to some other folks here that may have other questions.
There's a question here. Is it normal to feel lost at first when you are called to your awakening of your non-alignment? And what would you recommend for help in my clarity for my path? That's from April.
Would you repeat that again?
Yeah.
I didn't quite hear the first part of that.
Is it normal to feel lost at first when you are called to your awakening? When you are called to the awakening of your non-alignment? So some people are realizing, the life they're living, and I hope this is okay, April. Some people realize the life they're living is not in alignment with who they are. And then how can they gain that clarity to find their dharma or swadharma?
That's a beautiful question. And it is, I think, so important for all of us. We're all sort of recalibrating our lives all the time. It's not like we find our dharma, our purpose, our alignment, and that's it. We're just off and running. I mean, we're always kind of having to inquire periodically, is this choice, whatever this choice is in any moment, is this choice in alignment with my nature? Is it in some ways, is it a nourishing choice? That's an inquiry that I often make myself when I'm making a choice. Is this a nourishing choice, and therefore is it in alignment with my nature? So I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge you because you're showing the courage to even make the inquiry of how to align with my nature. So and believe me, we are supported by nature. The more we inquire, the more we ask for alignment, it comes. And the courage will be there to make significant changes in our lives. Sometimes we have to make big changes. Some people, get to the point where they just really hate their job. They just can't do it another day. And sometimes we have to get to that place of crisis, before we're really willing to make a shift, before we, before we can really, gather the courage to make a big change in the direction of alignment. Hopefully it doesn't have to come to that point of crisis for us. But it is very important, I feel, every day. And Deepak, when we're doing a lot of our seminars, through the Chopra organization, he exhorts people to make 4 inquiries during the meditation practice at some point. The first is, who am I? Which is in alignment with moksha. The second is, what do I want? Which is more connected with the kama piece. What do I want? What does nature want through me? What is my dharma? What is my dharma? Of course, relates to dharma. And the fourth inquiry is, what am I grateful for? Which in many ways relates to the artha piece that we talked about before. But I think the point of my bringing this up is to maybe to have those 4 inquiries available every day, just as a point of starting a particular day. Who am I? Who am I truly? Not the personality, not the roles we play, not even the physical body, which is changing all the time, not the relationships we engage in. Who am I really? What is that I am, in which all of this is taking place? The body, the personality, the roles we play, the relationships we engage in, all of that is taking place in something. And the more we begin to open to that, the more we can see ourselves in relation to the whole. So these inquiries are important because, and as I often say, this inquiry around dharma is really, so foundational to our lives. So my suggestion to you is that you continue to, in a prayerful way and with a sincere heart, every day, just say, help me to align with my sense of purpose. And then don't worry about attaching to it. Don't worry about grasping onto something. Allow yourself to be supported by nature. And if you do, the clues will start to appear. For example, you may start to see somebody doing something and you go, wow, that looks so interesting. That looks so cool. I wonder what it'd be like to do that. I would love to be able to do that. So sometimes the clues appear in the environment, and that's how we're guided to make choices in the direction of dharma. So don't be discouraged if you feel that you're in some way out of alignment with dharma. We're all a little bit out of alignment with dharma from time to time. But the most important thing is, don't have judgment about ourselves, to just know that in any moment, if we open ourselves to dharma, the universe will support us. We'll be guided. Trust, and just don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. It's the truth.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. We are just going to wrap it up right now. Is there anything you'd like to close with, Brent?
Oh gosh. Well, anyway, I'm grateful for all of you. I mean it. I feel it's such a privilege to to connect with like-minded people and people that are resonant to this kind of conversation, to these kinds of values, and to this kind of knowledge that's come to us from this great Vedic tradition, and really is fundamental to life itself, the perennial philosophy, as it's often called. So my wish for you is that you'll utilize some of these tools that we discussed here today. Experiment with them. Use these inquiries. And by all means, be regular in your spiritual practice. Stay regular in your meditation.
Thank you, Brent.
And allow yourself to be guided. Yes, you're welcome. Namaste.
Namaste. And I've just put your website in the chat. So I can tell you, Brent's a great astrologer if you want to go deeper into your dharma. It can be indicated in the chart. And so if you feel moved to do that with him, I highly recommend it. So thank you for being here, and we'll be in touch soon. I'll see you soon, I hope. I'll see everybody tomorrow, hopefully at the Feast for the Soul. Thanks again, and you'll get a copy of this. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy yourselves.
Thank
Bye.
you, Brent.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.